Hey guys, Jason here at Drum Percussion Studio, and I just wanted to take a little time to go over a topic that we've covered in some of our classes, but it's a lot. It's a lot of information, so I just want to kind of go back over some of what we've said. Feel free to, watch at your own pace, pause it, and do some practicing, whatever you need to do. The topic is the circle of fourths, circle of fifths, the order of sharps and flats, key signature. All of that stuff kind of goes together. So let's jump in. One of the first things that we talked about was the order of sharps. And so whenever you write your music and you write your key signature, you always write the sharps and the flats in a particular order. So the order for sharps is F, C, G, D, A, E, B. So if you have one sharp in the key signature, it's always going to be F sharp. If you have three, it's always going to be in this order, the first three sharps, F, C, and G. We're not going to have a G sharp in our key signature without first having an F and a C. The way that some people remember this is fat cats get dizzy after eating breakfast. I didn't make it up. Somebody told me that a long time ago. I'm sure there's a million different ways that you could remember it. So if that helps you, by all means use it. Fat cats get dizzy after eating breakfast. If you know the order of sharps, you automatically know the order of flats. It's the exact opposite. So B, E, A, D, G, C, F. So the opposite of what the sharps were. I've heard some people say bead, go catch fish, bead, greatest common factor. Again, whatever you like, whatever works for you. Just remember, one is the opposite of the other. So as long as you've got one of them, you automatically know the others. And so this is useful in a few different ways. One thing it's useful for is learning our scales. So in the beginning, we learned that scales are made out of a pattern of notes where we use a starting pitch, and then we go up 2 whole steps, a half, 3 whole steps, and a half. So that's definitely one way to figure out the scales. It takes a little time. Another way is if you can memorize this order, or at least have a cheat sheet in front of you, that is another way to do it. So for instance, if I'm learning my G scale, it's got one sharp, it's that F sharp. So I'm going to play from G to G, and my one accidental is going to be an F sharp. We'll get into this a little bit more later. If I'm playing the D major scale, I'm going to play from D to D with 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp. Okay? So we'll talk in just a moment about how we know what is actually in the key signature and what accidentals we use to make that scale. So that's the first thing I want to cover is the order of sharps and flats. So they're right here, F, C, G, D, A, E, B for sharps, and the opposite, B, E, A, D, G, C, F for flats. We talked about the circle of fifths and the circle of fourths. We've written it down in class, but if you want to get a handy sheet, there's a million of them online, so just Google circle of fifths, circle of fourths, and find something that you like, print it out, and use it as reference. This one right here, as most of them do, it shows C at the top. So if you imagine this circle being like a clock, at 12 o'clock is C. And what's going to happen is as we go around the circle of fifths, clockwise, we're going to add a sharp every time. So C, we've learned, has no accidentals. They're all natural. As we go around, the next scale is going to be 5 notes higher. That's what we call a fifth. So for example, if we're on C, I'll play it on the marimba here. We play the first 5 notes. C, D, E, F, G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we go up a fifth, 5 notes, that takes us to the G scale. As we go around the circle of fifths, we're going to add a sharp every time. So C was at the top, no sharps. The next scale, 5 notes higher, G, is going to have 1 sharp. Now remember that order of sharps that we talked about. When we add sharps, we always add them in the same order. So our first sharp is going to be an F sharp. So the G scale will have 1 sharp, and that 1 sharp will be an F sharp. So the way we apply that to our scales to practice is I like to outline my scale. I have my starting note and my ending note, G octaves. I know that I'm going to play G to G, and everything's going to be natural except that one accidental, which we said is going to be F sharp. So before I play, I find that, kind of make a mental note of where that is, and then I play. So that's my G scale. If I keep going around the circle of fifths clockwise, remember I'm going to go up 5 notes every time. Again, that's what we call a fifth. So if I was on G, I'm going to play the first 5 notes of my G scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that takes me to D. Okay? Again, I can count on my fingers, G, A, B, C, D. So the next scale in my circle of fifths is going to be D. As we go around the circle of fifths, remember we add a sharp every time. We add one, so that means whatever we had before stays. So we already had an F sharp, so we're going to keep that. And now we're going to add our second sharp. I know that that is a C sharp because I've memorized my order of sharps. Okay? So if we have 2 sharps, the first 2 sharps are going to be F sharp and C sharp. So again, I can do the same thing. I can outline my scale from D to D, starting and ending notes. And now I know that between my first and last note, this time I'm going to have 2 sharps, an F sharp and a C sharp. Again, I like to kind of touch them, make a mental note of what I'm looking at. I like to find a way to remember that. I see that the F sharp is the first sharp in the group of 3, and the C sharp is the first sharp in the group of 2. That just helps me remember that, and when it's time to play, I just play every note. Okay? So again, as we go around our circle, on the right side, the clockwise side, that's our circle of fifths because we're going up by 5 notes every time. So we started at C, no accidentals. We went to G, we had 1 sharp. We went to D, it's going to have 2 sharps. So we have the F sharp from before. We added a C sharp. And then if we go around again, we're going to have 3, 4, 5, etc., until we use all 7 of our sharps. As we do this, there's another thing that this can help us with. We mentioned the key signatures. So if we're reading our music, got some staff paper right here. If we're reading our music, and our music is written with, we'll say, 3 sharps. We've already decided that those 3 sharps are going to be F, C, and G sharp, okay? So we've got those 3 sharps. Now the other thing that can help us do is to quickly identify our key signatures. So what I mean is if we go to whatever our last sharp is, we said that we're going to use 3 this time, F, C, and G sharp, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. The last one, the third one in that case, was G sharp. If I go up a half step, that's going to take me to an A. That is the name of my major key signature. So the A key signature has 3 sharps, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. Okay, I could identify that because when I looked at my music, I saw my 3 sharps, F, C, and G, and I went up a half step from the last one, the G sharp, and that was the A, which identifies the major key signature. Okay, there's something different for minor, but for right now, let's stick with major. So that's one way we can use our order of sharps and flats, our circle of fifths. All of this kind of goes together to help us with our scales. Another way we can do it is if we decide that we want to play a particular scale, let's say E. I find E on my keyboard, and I go down a half step. A half step below E is going to be D sharp. So that would tell me the last sharp in my order of sharps to create the E scale. So let me back up for just a second. I want to figure out E, so I look at E, I go down a half step, and that note is D sharp. And that is going to be the last sharp in my key signature. So the key signature for E major would contain F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. Once I know that, I can start playing my scales. So take a little time to kind of practice that on your own. Just kind of give yourself a little quiz on, you know, if I have 4 sharps, what would those 4 sharps be, and what key signature would that be? Well, if I had 4, it would be these first 4, F, C, G, D, and that key signature would be E. If I had 3 sharps, they would be F, C, and G, and that key signature would be, hopefully you said A. So the last sharp is G, go up a half step, that's A. I'll give you one more. If we have 6 sharps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it would be these 6, F, C, G, D, A, and E. And using that last sharp, I'm going to go up a half step, and that's going to take me to, where's it at? If we're on E, go up a half step, or I'm sorry, I should say E sharp. Go up a half step, that takes us to F sharp. So that would be the key signature of F sharp. F sharp key signature. I can reverse it and go down a half step. I know that a lot of times we call that an F, but in this case it's E sharp. And that's going to be my last sharp. So I name everything from the beginning until I get to E. F, C, G, D, A, and E would be my last one. So play around with that a little bit. Maybe find a partner to quiz you on it. The flats, let's move to that. So we said that the flats are in the opposite order as the sharps. Okay? They work in a similar fashion. For the circle of fifths, now we're going to reverse it. Instead of going clockwise, we're going to go counterclockwise. And now we're not going to call it the circle of fifths. C to F would be a fourth. C, D, E, F. Okay? So as we go counterclockwise, we refer to this as the circle of fourths. And as we go around the circle of fourths, we're going to add a flat. So similar to what we did with the fifths, instead of sharps, we're going to be dealing with flats. So once again, at the top, we have C major, no sharps or flats. As we go around the circle of fourths, we're going to go up 4 notes. So C, D, E, F. First 4 notes of that scale. C, D, E, F. And we're going to now add 1 flat. We know from our order of flats that the first flat is a B. So the first flat is going to be B flat. So just like before, I'm going to outline my scale, F to F. Everything's going to be natural, except that B is now a B flat. So I play that. I'll continue around the circle of fourths. If I'm on F and I go up 4 more notes of the F scale, that takes me to B flat. So my next scale is going to be B flat. We keep everything that we had before, so we're going to keep that B flat, and then we're going to add the second one. I look to my order, second one is E. So the B flat scale is going to have a B flat and an E flat. So again, I find those notes. It's the B flat scale, so that is my first and last note. So I've got that, and then I identify the E flat, okay? And I play each of those. B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, A. Okay? Again, I can continue around the circle of fourths, going counterclockwise. I go up by 4 notes every time, the first 4 notes of the scale that I'm starting on, or the scale that I'm leaving. And I add a flat every time. Those flats are always added in this order. I cannot have an A flat without first having a B and an E flat, etc. Okay? Now, let's talk about identifying key signatures. It's similar but a little bit different than what we did with sharp key signatures. So if I want to figure out what is in the key signature of A flat, for example, these are my A flats, I'm going to think about my order. I'm going to name everything up to A flat, and then I'm going to go 1 beyond that. So the A flat scale, major, will have B flat, E flat, A flat, and then the very next flat, D flat. Okay? So I'm going to play it up here. So the A flat scale has B, E, A, and D flat. Give you another example. Let's say I want to do the D flat scale. Okay? I'm going to have everything up to D flat, and then I'm going to go one beyond to G flat. So I'll have B, E, A, D, and G flat. So I find those on my keyboard. Those are the notes that I'm going to use to play my scale. Now, we can also do the reverse of that. If I'm looking at a piece of music, or let's just say I just want to know what is in the key of E flat. We'll get to the music in a minute. I want to know what is in the key of E flat. Well, I know that I start at the beginning, I name everything up to that scale, and then I go one beyond. So if I want to know what's in the key of E flat, I'm going to think, okay, I've got B flat, I've got E flat, and then I've got my next flat, which is A flat. Another example, let's say I want to figure out the key of G flat, what is in my key signature. So I want to figure out G flat, so I name it all from the beginning. B, E, A, D, G, and then I add one more. The next one is C flat. Okay? So the key of G flat contains B, E, A, D, G, and C flat. We can reverse that. If somebody says, hey, I got a scale, and my scale has 3 flats, what are they? Well, I know it's B, E, and A, because I've memorized that. And then the next question is, okay, if I have those 3 flats, what key or what scale is that? Well, if it's B, E, and A, I go to my next to the last one, penultimate. That's the E flat, and that is the name of my scale. So if I have a scale with 3 flats, they would be B, E, and A flat. And the name of that scale, or that key signature, would be the name of the next to last flat, which is E flat. If I had 4 flats, 1, 2, 3, 4, B, E, A, D, then I would be playing in the key signature of A flat major. I go to the next to the last flat, and that gives me the name. So hopefully that helps kind of clarify a little bit. Again, it's a lot of information. It takes a little while to digest all of this, but once you can get these different things together, it's going to make learning your scales, playing your scales, and then later on more advanced music theory a lot easier. So just take your time, go back, look at your notes, review this video as long as you need to, and don't hesitate to post any questions or anything like that. Bring your questions to class or type them online. So the order of sharps, F, C, G, D, A, E, B. The order of flats is the opposite, B, E, A, D, G, C, F. We can use those together with our circle of fifths and fourths. Fifths is going clockwise, adding a sharp every time. Fourths is the opposite, counterclockwise, adding a flat every time. They're always added in this order. We can identify sharp scales by naming the half step below. Let me say that again. So if we're dealing with sharp scales, let's take A for example. If we go down a half step, which would be G sharp, that tells us the last sharp in the order of sharps for that key signature, F, C, G. There's probably a more concise way to have said that, so sorry. And if we're doing flats, we always go one beyond. So if we want to figure out the key of A flat, we name everything in order from the beginning, B, E, A, and we go one beyond that, D flat. So you can, again, experiment with that, put it in your own words. I'm sure you could be a little bit more eloquent than me. And that's what I got. So hope that helps, and see you guys in class. Bye.